All right, so keeping it in the Near ecosystem, so hopefully you guys are interested in that. So I guess as has been mentioned, so from Proximity, we are the ecosystem fund for Near, specifically focused on DeFi. But one of the things we do in addition to giving grants is really try to help the projects we work with think through some of the problems that they're facing. And definitely the most common one is liquidity. And we get to think through that at kind of like an ecosystem level. So we're going to kind of walk through some of the learnings that we've had. So we're just going to touch on three main things here. So first, we're going to talk about what the token liquidity lifecycle tends to look like. We're going to talk about some of the tools that exist for managing liquidity at each of these stages. And then we're going to talk about how we can apply these tools at the ecosystem level and help as many projects as possible, and also introduce a couple of new tools. So yeah, first up here is basically just a high-level overview of what a fairly typical life cycle looks like for a token from initial launch to kind of token generation all the way through to it becoming more mature. So let's start with price discovery. So when you launch a token, basically it's going to go to market and people are going to price it in some way. And as a DAO, assuming you're a DAO that launches a token, you have a few different tools and ways that you can kind of manage this process. I guess the default one is just YOLO, where you do nothing. You just sort of let the token do as it will. You let people decide they want to make the market for it on Uniswap or Trisolaris or whatever DEX they want to use, and it just kind of happens. No managed price discovery, just the market does what it wants to do. Or you could use the more traditional routes of like launch pads or ICOs. There's also like the balancer kind of liquidity bootstrapping pools, which is an interesting type of mechanism that's a little bit more graceful. And then you also have auctions. Moving on to a DEX, so you have initial price discovery, you've done that, whether the market did it on its own or whether you tried to manage that price discovery and like distribute a decent amount of tokens. Now you want to create some liquidity on an AMM or an order book, but probably an AMM. The most common one that's been used here is definitely the pool 2 mechanism. So for what that is basically you have your token paired with, say, Ethereum. So you could have Aurora and Ethereum. To incentivize or LPs to contribute to this pool, you can just give away a lot of your tokens. That's kind of the pool 2 approach. Basically, you incentivize liquidity providers to provide liquidity to your specific pair by just giving away your tokens. Definitely the most common one that's been used. It's also very expensive, and so some new mechanisms have kind of arose recently that might be a little bit cheaper or maybe more sustainable. V tokens is one that's been popularized by Curve. They were the first ones to launch this. This one is interesting in that they're giving away their own token, but they choose which pools to give the token to and how much based on voting. And what that's led to is some new teams or existing teams will try to acquire a lot of their tokens so they can vote to have emissions go to their pool. And you'll see this everywhere this year, I think. I mean, almost every team in DeFi is like talking about whether or not they're going to do something like this, along with some criticisms of it. And definitely the newest, but mechanism that we're really excited about is this idea of single-sided pools. So Bancor launched this, I guess like a year ago now with Bancor V2, where liquidity providers can just have a single token. They could have, say, ETH, and they'll just put ETH into this pool and earn fees. And that's going to be paired with the Bancor token in their case. And what this does is it opens the market to people who don't have to have two tokens. They don't have to like sell one of the tokens to get the other token in the pair. They can just deposit tokens in a single-sided way. Some newer protocols like Tokamak, Ondo, and Rift have taken this a step further even, and they actually just match up. They create a bunch of different single-sided pools and then pair them together on some dexes to like create liquidity. So that's been a pretty interesting and definitely evolving area. On the lending side, which is typically the next part of the liquidity lifecycle, you go from the DEX. Now you have a decent amount of liquidity there, and you want to make it so that holders of your token don't have to sell your token in order to unlock some liquidity for themselves, which allows them to take a leverage position, potentially even short the token, or just take some USDC out and like go buy a house or something. This is where there is not that much tooling just yet. I guess one kind of naive way to do it that I've seen being used on a lending protocol in Solana called Sollend is basically that pool 2 approach, but for lending. You can incentivize people to deposit your token by giving them your token. A newer one that's actually really exciting is by the team called Tribe Turbo that I don't think is out just yet, but seems to be coming to market pretty soon. This is cool because this allows a DAO to basically take out one single loan against their own token with Fei, which is a stablecoin that's managed by the Tribe DAO, and then deposit this in this Fei, this stablecoin that people would want to borrow, into an isolated pool for their token holders to then borrow against. So I think we're going to see this be used a lot more aggressively. So after you've had your token, be usable on lending, like the next sort of stage, and generally the latest stage, is derivatives against it. So typically options and some kind of futures product, whether that's a perpetual future or a traditional type of future. Definitely an area like lending and kind of price discovery where we don't really have that many tools yet. The Ribbon team, which operates an options vault product, is experimenting with V tokens and how that could incentivize liquidity there. So I think that we'll see more approaches like that happen pretty soon. And potentially we'll see something like the V token approach, but used for perpetual swaps. So yeah, that's the liquidity lifecycle. As we kind of touched on a little bit here, one of the best sort of emerging categories of tools is this idea of liquidity as a service. And to give a high level overview of what this is, basically in any sort of liquidity scenario, you have two sort of actors. You've got liquidity seekers. A lot of times it's DAOs, like the issuer of this token, or even a community who wants to generate liquidity for the token. And then you have liquidity givers. And most of the time, this is the holders of tokens that are really popular that people want to swap against or that they hold a lot of. So Ethereum is a great example of this. A lot of layer 1 tokens are decent examples, and then stablecoins probably by far the most dominant. And the idea of liquidity as a service is you're shifting the risk and return from the liquidity seeker, who's willing to give up a lot in order to get liquidity, and the liquidity giver, who basically needs to be incentivized to actually provide liquidity. And oftentimes what this looks like is the liquidity seeker is taking on all the risk and giving away all of the returns to the giver. So to make this a little bit clearer, we're going to walk through an example. So let's say that we have the AuroraDAO who wants to create liquidity for the Aurora to Near pair on Trisolaris. Trisolaris is similar to Uniswap, automated market maker that runs on Aurora. So the AuroraDAO can work with a protocol like Rift. Rift is basically going to do two things. They're going to deploy two pools. They're going to create an Aurora token pool and a Near token pool. The AuroraDAO is then going to take Aurora, put it into the Aurora pool, and you're going to have Near holders who are, in this case, going to be kind of that liquidity giver, who are going to deploy their Near into the Near pool. And then those two tokens will be matched together and deployed in a traditional way to the Aurora to Near pool on Trisolaris. Now, the reason that the Near holders are interested in this is that they are going to get all of the LP fees. The AuroraDAO is going to give them all of the trading fees that are earned from the volume that occurs on this pair. And they're basically going to get nothing. So the Near holders effectively get double fees, double the fees that they would get if they actually provided, one Aurora to one Near themselves. I think this is really going to, we've definitely seen this start to really pick up some steam. Right now, it pretty much only exists on DEXs, but Tribe Turbo about to launch on lending, and I think what we're going to see is end-to-end liquidity as a service. We're going to have products like this that are launched for DAOs to manage each stage in the liquidity lifecycle, starting with price discovery, ending with derivatives, and kind of bridging the gap across the whole thing. So we have liquidity as a service. It's this great set of tools. Now let's talk about how we can actually apply this to the sort of ecosystem level and generate some really good ecosystem liquidity, which is one of our goals, our biggest goals at Proximity. So taking a step back and just talking about what ecosystem liquidity looks like, typically, you've got the base token. This is the native token of each of these protocols. And then you've got the ecosystem tokens, which is usually the applications that are built on top that may or may not have their own token. So the ecosystem tokens in the context of liquidity as a service are usually going to be the liquidity seekers. And the base tokens are going to be the liquidity givers. And the reason for this is that base tokens just tend to be the most liquid. If you look at any L1, that token is going to see the most trading volume. It's going to be listed on the most exchanges. It's going to be less volatile, probably still pretty volatile, but much less volatile typically than these ecosystem tokens. And it's going to have the best on-ramps, which makes it really like the prime sort of token to be a liquidity giver in any kind of scenario. The problem with the base token, though, when it comes to L1s, is that the majority of base tokens in proof-of-stake networks, which is just about all of them at this point, are going to be staked. So just like 3 examples there, Near and Avalanche both have about 60% of the circulating supply staked, and Solana has 74% of the supply staked. This is great for the network, of course. More stake equals better security for the network, and it's a very obvious choice for holders of these tokens because it is the most reliable kind of passive yield, which is the thing that everybody wants: passive high yield. But it's not very good for liquidity at all. However, we can actually take the tools that we just talked about, combine them with staking, and make it so that it can actually be good for liquidity as well. So this is something that we're working on in the Near ecosystem, is this idea of stake farms. And the high-level description of it, it's really just combining staking with liquidity as a service. So you can basically have your cake of like providing security for the network and earning that yield, but then also earning additional rewards on top of it and providing liquidity to all of those ecosystem tokens. So the idea here is you want to create a single entry point for users to provide liquidity to their favorite projects. So it's pretty similar to what's like a Yearn Finance was trying to do, just to make it like the dead simplest way to earn the best yield for a single token like DAI. We want to create an opportunity for ecosystem projects to sort of manage this and upgrade these pools as they want to manage moving across the parts of the liquidity lifecycle. The real kicker here, what enables this is liquid staking. So liquid staking is basically issuing a derivative against the tokens that you've staked, so you can use those tokens in DeFi. So you stake one NEAR, you get one ST NEAR. That NEAR is actually locked up, but you created a new token that basically gives the right to claim that NEAR, to unstake that NEAR. So that's unlocking a lot of opportunity here, and what's going to allow us to create this staking plus type of model. So you have the liquid staking token. You can deploy this liquid staking token into the Liquidity as a Service, and you can generate a better passive return than staking alone. So let's go back to that example that we went before, just to make it really clear, to kind of illustrate what we're talking about here. So same scenario as before. We have the AuroraDAO. They want liquidity for Aurora on Trisolaris. So with the staking farm, they're going to deploy this, and essentially the deal that they're going to make to your holders is we're going to give you dual rewards. Not only are you going to stake normally and get your staking your rewards, we're also going to give you some Aurora tokens. Because what we're going to do is take the NEAR that you've staked, turn it into ST NEAR, and then deploy it into our pool. So NEAR holders will put their tokens into the stake farm. We'll bring Rift back into the example here. You'll notice the one difference. You have the Aurora pool, but now you have a different token. That token is that staked NEAR. So just imagine as the staked version of NEAR, it's just going to be earning the rewards as staking rewards come in. The AuroraDAO is still going to put their tokens in the Aurora pool. That stake farm is going to deploy the tokens into the ST NEAR pool, and then bam, we have that liquid Aurora to ST NEAR pool on Trisolaris, and again have all of the LP fees that are going to NEAR holders. So AuroraDAO here, they want to do this because they're going to get liquidity. They're going to be able to get some new token holders because they're going to be giving away this Aurora token to people who are supporting their project, which is very aligned with their mission. And they're also going to get flexibility to deploy new pools as they want to move further along this liquidity lifecycle. So we can imagine a future scenario where we actually do have good liquidity as a service tools for price discovery and derivatives in the entire cycle. And we can imagine that a new DAO will change their stake farm to utilize the tools at whatever part of the liquidity lifecycle they're currently at. And then for the NEAR holder, they get their NEAR staking rewards. They get Aurora rewards, like the Aurora tokens, and they're also going to get the LP tokens. So they're going to get a substantially higher yield than they get from staking alone in just as passive of a way. They don't really have to do anything. They can just keep their tokens there and accumulate these rewards. So basically, to recap all of this, the way we're thinking about sustainable liquidity is doing three things. We want to create the best possible passive earning opportunity for the base token, which in our case is NEAR. So it's this staking plus option. We don't want people to just think I want to be lazy and earn rewards on my NEAR and stake it. We want them to think, okay, I'm going to use a stake farm because then I'm going to get even more rewards for doing the least amount of work still. We need end-to-end liquidity as a service tools in order to enable this. That's one of the building blocks. And then we need to introduce the stake farm to help DAOs manage, basically navigate through this entire process. All right, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Cool, so yeah, I can definitely take some questions.
Thank you. First of all,